Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
It doesn't get more intense than this moment.
Stand well back, everybody, because that is a different class from France.
Maybe another kick from Ford. Little chip over the top. Where's this one bouncing? Oh, it's bouncing England's way again.
McInally pounces the opportunistic try from the former Scottish captain. Sexton from outside the 10-metre line. It's spinning. It's spinning. Jonathan Sexton has made it.
Here goes Thomas Williams. Chickering. Charge for the line. Oh, it's the perfect start to the second half of Wales.
Has told it to Byrne. They have numbers on it. And to Andrew Conway. And over the corner he goes. Superb rugby from Ireland.
Now we're talking Six Nations Round 4, which is very much upon us. England-France at Twickenham is unmissable, really. Wales have the Italians. They're all about a Grand Slam tilt the following weekend in Paris, 7 days later. And on Sunday, it's Murrayfield, Scotland against Ireland. Very happy to say, to give us the Scottish perspective, we have Andy Nicol with us, 23 caps for Scotland, European Cup winner with Bath. Hi Andy, how you doing?
Yeah, really good, thanks Joe.
Thanks for the time. Yeah, great to have you with us. And Niamh Briggs, Grand Slam winner with Ireland, of course. How are you, Niamh?
Hi Joe, how are you?
Very well. So Andy, how many points are Ireland going to win this by? 5, 10, what are you feeling?
You know, it's a I love the Ireland-Scotland fixture, but it's given us a lot of pain over the years, I have to say, and we've been on the wrong end on many a battering. There's been some tight games, I guess. I mean, last year the Six Nations that kicked off in Dublin, didn't it? And that was a tight game, and if Stuart Hogg hadn't dropped the ball over the line, who knows? But we've also had some pretty dark days. Yokohama, for starters. And even the game in the Autumn Nations Cup was almost back to sort of Yokohama-esque, the way that Ireland were able to just bully Scotland, especially up front. And that's where I think Scotland have improved. And I think the pack that Scotland have now able to get out in the pitch is one that can go toe-to-toe with many packs.
Well, Niamh, that's the worry, isn't it? Because, I mean, I ask Andy by how many points, but we're all very worried about this game. I mean, genuinely, Scotland have improved in that area where we always felt, however we were going, even in 2019 in Yokohama, Ireland could bully Scotland and get round the edge and get the job done. Whereas now there's a sense they have improved in that area, and they have some unbelievable players behind that improved pack. And, it's hard to know how to feel about this one, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of nerves for that game the weekend. I think Scotland have been playing really, really well. I think they've been building since Japan, to be honest. I think not just in player spec, but also about how they go about playing the game. They've obviously run things a lot through Finn Russell, but I think Stuart Hogg's ability to control the ball and phase play and control the game is probably one of the best in the world from a back three perspective. So, yeah, look, it's going to be a really difficult game for Ireland. I think I'm really looking forward to the battle, especially the back row battle. I think Hamish Watson's probably having an unbelievable tournament, and for me, more than likely going to be the sevens lines maybe. And so, if Ireland can quell that back row, I think they could be in with a chance, but it's going to be difficult.
Andy, just for a second to go big picture and put the Ireland-Scotland rivalry into some kind of context over the last, say, 30-odd years. I was reading Jerry Thornley laid out all the stats in the Irish Times over the last couple of days. Ireland this century have finished above Scotland in the Six Nations table in 20 of the 21 Six Nations, the only exception being 2013, which marked the end for Declan Kidney. And Ireland have also won, of the 22 meetings this century, 18 of them. It's such a change from the 90s, where there were 12 games and the Scots won 11 and drew 1. You were, in and around that beginning of the changing of the guard, coming off the period of dominance for Scotland. Is the fair sense, I mean, we certainly feel Irish rugby improved. Did Scotland also go into a big decline, and what was the area specifically of the decline?
it definitely went into decline. Professional rugby, Joe, was the big changing point and the turning point. I got my first cap in '92. We, no disrespect, we saw the Ireland as a guaranteed win just about every year. That's the way it was at the time.
So did everyone.
Yeah, and my second cap was in Lansdowne Road, and I scored in the corner, and I thought international rugby is easy. But professional rugby was what really hindered Scotland. And what was strange, really strange, and I've looked at this and analysed it. Ireland and Scotland had basically the same structures in the rugby environment going into professional rugby. We had clubs, we had districts and international. You guys had clubs, provinces, international. Yet you made the transition unbelievably well, and we struggled. And a lot of it was down. Over many a glass of red wine with Keith Wood over the years, discussing why it was so different. And because Edinburgh-Glasgow, there's been a rivalry. It's the longest standing club fixture in world rugby. Yet there's not the rivalry that exists there between, say, Leinster and Munster. And so one factor, which sounds a small factor, is that you had home grounds like Donnybrook, as it was for Leinster, Thomond Park, and Ravenhill, as it was, and then the county ground, the sports ground in Galway. We were peripatetic. Our Edinburgh and Glasgow in the south, they went round all the club grounds, so they never had that sense of identity when the game went professional. And that meant Scotland were then catching up for a number of years, and to be fair, never really have caught up. So, in the 26 years that the game's, or 25 years the game's been professional, we've been way behind everyone and trying to catch up. And we tried 4 districts to start with, and then we went to 3, went to 2, back to 3, and at 2. And with 2, you've got a limited number of players, but we can only afford 2 good sides. And that's what Edinburgh are now. Edinburgh and Glasgow are now. So there's been so many things, but you can put it all back down to the game of rugby union turning professional in 1996. Okay.
And was the quality of player being produced not as good as well? Or can we explain that as part of professional rugby? Or were the players there just lacked some kind of structure?
A bit of everything, really, Joe. I think, I've been quite critical recently of our academy structure. I just don't see the numbers being produced there's 4 academies in Scotland. I look at the number of quality players that almost one academy in Ireland, the Leinster Academy, the quality of players that academy produces is unbelievable. Now, I know it's coming out of a number of schools, but we've got a number of really rugby playing schools in Scotland. So I just don't see that development happening in the same way. So, there is a lack of players. We've not got a lot of players, but then neither do Ireland. Now I've always used Ireland as the comparison, and you've got competing sports as well. Whereas football is huge here in Scotland, but we've not got hurling and everything else to contend with. So I've just looked on with envy, really an envy about how Ireland have got their structures right and that pathway right, and developing new players coming through. We produce the odd good player every year. We've got some good young ones coming through. There's a couple of youngsters that have just emerged into the Glasgow team in the last couple of weeks. But they're just 1s or 2s, whereas you see Ireland producing so many. And and here's an indictment: our under-20s got relegated from the top tier last year in the under-20 World Championship. And so that means we're not playing against Ireland or England or in the Six Nations if it was taking place right now, and the World Championship coming up in the summer. So that's an indictment of this lack of talent. Conveyor belt. There's 1s or 2s coming off it, not the 10. And when you're a small country like we are, talent identification should be easy. You shouldn't let anyone slip through the net. But I just don't think we're developing them the right way.
Niamh, give us a sense of just how worried you are about this game, because Paul O'Connell said yesterday that in his time, going back to his debut in 2002, this is the best Scottish side he's come up against. And they were obviously very impressive at Twickenham, albeit there are mitigating factors around England at the moment. And then from 17-3 up against Wales, they blow it, and the Fagerson sending off notwithstanding. But I mean, it was a silly thing for him to do as well. So it's not like Scotland are blameless in terms of going down to 14 men. The point has been made about Wales. They never give you a game, really. They make you win it and they hang on, and that's why they overachieve. Whereas with Scotland, you'd almost feel over the years the opposite is true. They do some daft things. Stuart Hogg not grounding that ball, for instance, last year, and they'll talk themselves up, and ultimately there's a soft underbelly. So, are we kind of worried but still feeling ultimately we'll get through this?
I would be worried. I think that Scotland, I know we were talking about England afterwards, that game, in terms of that England really were rusty and off the pace, but I think Scotland didn't give them a chance to get into the game. Their line speed was incredible. Their ability to find grass in the backfield was as good as any team. They tactically, technically were really astute for that whole 80 minutes. I think this was what we had spoken about after that game. You know, could they mentally get up for the Wales game after such a high in Twickenham? Could they consistently perform? And they didn't. But as I was talking to Andy before here, we came on, it's you know, they've had a 4-week break now because they've not played against France, obviously. So does that stop their momentum from an Irish perspective? I hope it does a bit, but also does it refresh them after that tough game against Wales for them to be able to go again in a like manner like they did against England? They're almost restarting the tournament, and that's probably my biggest concern.
Andy, how should we not play against Scotland? What do they want?
They certainly want a broken field. I think if you play a structure and if you play like you've done against Scotland in the last 10 years, then that's a good start, which is, you know, that physicality up front. But Scotland have got a pack now. I think there's been subtle changes taking place, and there's been big changes in Gregor Townsend's coaching team. So Steve Tandy in defence, Peter de Villiers at scrum, and John Dalziel. You know, John Dalziel's maybe somebody that you wouldn't have heard about, and but he's done a fantastic job. And you know, there is strength and depth now as well. You know, again, it's been over the years, Scotland might get a good first team on the pitch, but as soon as the subs come off the bench, there's a real drop off, and you would fall away in the last 20 minutes of games. Well, at the moment, you've got quality coming off the bench there as well. So. You know, they are developing a deeper squad. You know, I think we got to look back at those first two games. Huge confidence of beating England at Twickenham, and the way we did it. It should have been a 20-point win. You know, we were hanging on, if you like, at the end, but it shouldn't have been. It was much more convincing than that. And there's now attack. There's brilliant shape in attack, and it's the variety of attack that is good. And Finn Russell is at the heart of that. But Stuart Hogg at 15. When he was the only player that really had a cutting edge, then that meant you could cut off the source. And that's what Ireland have done over the years very well. They've just absolutely flown up in the midfield and stopped the ability to get the ball out to Hogg. But when you've got Finn Russell now at 10, and you've got Chris Harris, who's playing really well at 13, you've got Doon van der Merwe in the wing, who's ripping up trees at the moment. When you've got all that cutting edge with Cam Redpath making his debut at Twickenham, and very impressive. You know, it means that there's a cutting edge throughout the backline now. So Ireland can't just snuff out the attack, the threat that comes from 15. So I think it's a full-pronged attack Scotland have now, which actually makes them quite dangerous to play against and very difficult to defend against.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So Niamh, Irish defence will be stressed, and it's a more complicated offering from Scotland. In terms of the Irish attack, listening to Andy talk there and other people, that point about a structured Irish performance being maybe the best way to get past Scotland makes sense on the face of it. It's just interesting timing in that we're after the performance in Rome, where we saw more, you know, heads up, unstructured play, and we're looking for more offloads and more creativity and spontaneity. It sort of sounds like that might be, you know, there might be a pause button pressed on that for Murrayfield.
I hope there isn't, to be honest. I think that we've got to go and take that level of attack that we played against Italy and try and expand on it. I think a lot will be dependent on the players that we pick. I think, you know, if we do pick Gibson Park, say, for example, at 9, we don't want him box kicking because his box kicking isn't as effective as Conor Murray's, and then therefore you're going to give Stuart Hogg all this room to be able to pick apart broken defences, and let's face it, he's really good at that. I still want us to attack. I still want us to be square to the line. I still want us to be able to come around the corner and attack at pace, and not be shackled by the fact that we're playing Scotland, that we can't look to throw that extra pass or that offload. And I think that that's going to be really important. And yeah, look, if I'm Scotland, you're going to set your defence up like we're going to box kick all day and kick the corners and try and find a little bit of grass to be able to set piece. And but you know, you'd like to think that Ireland can try and come with another level of attack, I suppose, and another level of performance than what we saw against Italy.
Well, Niamh, if we're box kicking to Stuart Hogg the way we box kicked to Brees Doolan, it's going to be a long day.
Yeah, 100%. And I really hope that's not the case. And I think the Gibson Park, Murray, that selection is going to be really interesting. I think, to be fair to Gibson Park, he's done okay, he's done well, he's got pace, and if we play to his strengths, then we select him. But if we select Conor Murray, we can't go back to that slow nature game, because he's slow, and then Sexton's slower because the ball's in the air for too long. And let's face it, Johnny was really good against Italy, taking the ball at pace, because the ball was quicker coming from Gibson Park, if that makes any sense. So you'd like to see, if Murray is playing, that his remit then is just to fire the ball out, just go and run. 5-6 years ago, Conor Murray was one of the best scrum halves in the world, because he had a cut. He was able to have a look around the edges. He was able to make decisions on the go. Whereas the last few years, whether it's down to game plan structure, I'm not really sure, but it's just been a lot slower nature.
Andy, be brutal. We're not sensitive. We can take it. What's your general perception of Ireland last couple of years?
Well, last couple of years.
Say post 19 World Cup.
Yeah. So it's not been. I mean, Andy Farrell. That's an interesting dynamic when you step up from being the defence coach to head coach, and the motivator into the strategic coach. That can be difficult. I mean, he's a class act. Don't get me wrong, but that's a changed dynamic, and maybe that's taken a while to find its feet. I mean, listen, you could easily have won the first 2 games in the Six Nations here without much having to have changed. So, it's not desperate. And then when you go to Rome and you get so much confidence playing against Italy and scoring the tries that you did, that can really just turn things around. As I say, it's margins, fine margins all the time, and that's the same with Scotland, to be perfectly honest, because there was a drop off in quality of performance from Twickenham to Murrayfield against Wales, and that was enough to blow a 17-3 lead. We were in there 22, looking so convincing. We got a try there, 24-3, game over, and we'd be going 3 from 3 into playing France, and so 2 from 2 into playing France. So it's there's fine margins, and so there's not much. It doesn't take much for Ireland to suddenly click into gear. Look at Wales. They've been sort of just plodding along in many ways, but they've just found a way to win games, and okay, things have gone their way. But then when they needed to against England, when they came back, they just turned it up, and it didn't take a huge amount of difference in strategy or anything like that. So Ireland have got great players. Ireland have got champions in that team. And so they can click back into the familiarity in the back line with the Leinster back line that played against Italy. Will that go into against Scotland on Sunday? I think Henshaw and Ringrose as a midfield pairing are just fantastic, and really excited about how they're playing. So Ireland are a good side that maybe just haven't been playing as well as they can, but that can click, as we saw in Rome, very, very easily.
Well, we're hoping. It feels like a couple of years now. We've been waiting for it. Finn Russell, needless to say, is on people's minds. Johnny Sexton, have a listen, was talking about Finn Russell at his press conference this afternoon.
He's obviously a big threat for us. Knowing that he's got a full box of tricks that he tries to pull out most games, and he's obviously a threat to the line. He's got a good short kicking game. He can pull the strings if we let him, and he's hurt us in the past before. We haven't played against him the last couple of times we've played Scotland, so again we've kind of had to go back and look at some old footage. But he's been in good form for his club, and he's a massive threat, like they have across their team. But obviously when you got him and Hogg, they're probably the standout guys. But we have to be on our game this week to stop them.
So Andy, if you're sitting on your couch watching Finn Russell over the years, where's the ratio of that's absolutely brilliant Finn Russell to, oh my God, Finn Russell, what are you doing?
Well, remember I played with his coach Gregor when he was in his day, and Gregor Townsend was exactly like that as well. He win you games, but he'd lose games as well. And I've seen a maturity in Finn Russell. And let's be honest, what happened this time last year has probably helped. COVID actually came at a good time for Scotland and the relationship between Gregor and Finn. And he's gone away. He's He's realised that international rugby is really important, and how you conduct yourself coming back from a big club like Racing is you've got to come back into how that team environment is. And so I think he's the complete standoff at the moment. It's great to hear Johnny Sexton. You could almost sort of hear the pride in his voice, because there's the respect from one standoff to another. And Finn Russell's got it all at the moment. He's got the variety in attack. He's got the kicking game, probably the best kicking game in the world rugby at the moment. The variety of kicks as well. The short kicking, long kicking, everything like that. But what was really pleasing, I guess, from a Scotland perspective, was that we won at England, we won at Twickenham without Finn Russell playing that well. He actually, he had a couple of moments and he had a couple of great things, but he didn't have his best game. And so there's more to come. And that's where, when you've got a backline now that Scotland have, there's other threats. And that makes Finn Russell even more dangerous, because it used to be the case, and we mentioned it earlier, if you want to stop Scotland playing, you just cut out the source. They cut off the source to the ball getting out to Stuart Hogg, and that meant you're closing down Finn Russell. There's players around him. When you've got players like Cameron Redpath, I don't think is going to be back this weekend, but James Lang is a good player at 12 as well, and Chris Harris, as I say, has been really well. Finn Russell loves defences coming to him, so he can offload, and these guys can play off him. He doesn't mind that. He loves the physical side of it. But when you've got nobody to offload, nobody creative to offload, then that's when you can see how teams have been able to really stop Scotland playing. So Finn Russell is playing very well in a better team. And that is always the case. You need players around you to allow somebody like that to show off his talents.
Stuart Hogg's in the form of his life as well. I mean, at Twickenham, he was absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, I mean, and so we've got that added dimension that he's playing for Exeter, so Scotland don't control him throughout the Six Nations. And Hoggy went back to play for Exeter last weekend. Well, that's good. Hoggy, he thrives on playing. He wants to play. He's one of those players, he just gets better the more he plays. And obviously we were, fingers crossed, he got through unscathed injury-wise. And I think that he had some ice at the end of the game, which was a bit concerning for Scotland fans. But I think he got through okay. And he's just playing with that confidence. And again, there's a maturity to his game. The captaincy has sat well with him. Some people, you give your captaincy to your best player, it doesn't always work. And I think with Stuart Hogg, it is working. And he's not worrying too much about the communication with the referee. Because let's be honest, fullback's one of the worst positions to captain from, because you're not anywhere near the ball or the referee. But he's just letting the players like Ali Price and Hamish Watson, Jamie Ritchie, Johnny Gray, much closer to the action, control things. He's just leading by example. And what a leader, what an example he's giving, because he's making ground just about every time he gets the ball. And but he's not throwing off some of these offloads that he used to do. He's playing very maturely, and he's at the moment, you would say he's number one fullback in Britain and Ireland at the moment for a red shirt in the summer.
Niamh, I'll bring you in one second a few Ireland selection questions. But so Andy, if in broad terms post 2019 here, where I'm sure Gregor Tenzin was under a bit of pressure afterwards, if we're saying that Scotland have become a bit more pragmatic and toughened up in the pack, which was always an Achilles heel, and then there's flair behind that pack, and the blend is starting to look really good. What is that chink that emerged against Wales? What is that kind of self-destruct issue, psychological or otherwise, and how big a worry is that for you?
Well, so Joe, sometimes I think we can, and as a pundit, you sometimes overanalyze things. We just dropped off against England. Our the set piece was outstanding. Our defence was outstanding, and our discipline was exactly where it needs to be. And against Wales, it just dropped off slightly, not by much. So when we were 17-3 up, we were not that ruthless in the 22. Our discipline, we then gave away 3 penalties, one after the other, and then you go from one end of the pitch, almost scoring, to conceding a try at the other. And then the set piece, the defence of the driving maul was not very good, and we lost a couple of lineouts. It's literally things like that can be the difference between winning a game of international rugby and losing. So I don't think Scotland, by beating England at Twickenham, it doesn't mean that all the ills have been solved and they're now a great side. And losing to Wales doesn't mean that they've gone back to where they were. They just dropped off their levels of performance. And that, for me, was what the gap can be a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing to have that month between Wales and now Ireland, because the France game was off. Because I think they would have wanted to get straight back on that horse, get out to Paris and really test themselves against probably the best team in the championship, and see if they can get back to the levels of accuracy and execution that they did at Twickenham, and not have what the drop off they had against Wales. So I'm really intrigued to see if Scotland can get back to those levels that we showed against England, and I'm pretty confident we will.
I mean, it's such a huge game for both sides. It completely transforms how the championship will be viewed. So much at stake. Niamh, Jacob Stockdale's back in the squad. Are we looking at Lowe and Larmour on the wings though, starting?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really difficult for Andy Farrell to drop either of them, especially James Lowe, because he's put his money on him in terms of he's continuing to select him, even though he's had a couple of mistakes in the defensive line. And so, yeah, look, I think he would be unfortunate for either of them. I suppose that's probably the rootless nature of this business. But I feel that there won't be many kind of positional or team changes from Italy. I think they went and did what was asked of them. They played well, and I think to get confidence and then to have the backing of that team, you just kind of got to go and select as much as you can, similarly, as long as everybody's fit. Yeah.
Front row, it's the Herrion versus Kelleher discussion ongoing. Most people I speak to want Kelleher in there.
Yeah, I thought he did. I thought he did well. I think he offers a lot around the pitch, and to be fair to him, I thought his line-out throwing was excellent against Italy, and I think that's probably where the biggest question mark had been previous to this tournament. And look, he's still a young player. He's still trying to learn his trade in there. And but I do think that against Scotland, their pack is incredibly mobile. We're going to have to look to move them around the park, and Kelleher probably does that. It's just that if you're looking for certainty at line-out, certainty at scrum, well then you're probably looking at Rob Herring. But I feel, for me, I'd love to see King Kelleher get another shot at a level above and see how he gets on.
Yeah, this is the difference, isn't it, between like being in the hot seat like Andy Farrell is and watching on from the sideline. It's so easy for us to say, yeah, let's see how Kelleher gets on, but like Andy Farrell needs to win this game. It's the tricky thing.
Yeah, look, I'd love just to see them to I watched back the games over last week, from the first 3 games, and to be fair to Ireland, they haven't done a huge amount wrong. Their set piece has been really good. Their defensive shape for a majority, bar a couple of individual errors. So you can't always bank that it won't be an individual error. It's game of rugby. Nobody's going to be perfect for 80 minutes. And I thought that it's been really good. I think we've spoken about their attack time and time again on this show, and I felt like that they brought it up a notch against Italy. And look, we can all sit here and say, oh, look, it was only Italy, but we still had to go and play what was in front of us. And I think that they did that really well. They exploited space. For me, it was the intensity and the pace that they ran at. That was a big difference for me from the first 2 games. And I think if they can do that this Saturday, albeit with whoever is selected, as Andy spoke about earlier on, it's all about these fine margins. And it's the same thing with player selection, like how unlucky was Rhys Ruddock to miss out against Italy, considering how well he had played the previous game. And so at this level, we should be having these conversations as pundits, heading into a game where we're giving out about players that aren't selected and players that are selected. And because that, you want 2-3 players in every position to be pushing standards all the time.
So Tyke Burns seems to be undroppable at the moment at 6. Standard generally will be 8, Niamh. And then, Hamish Watson is lurking around. Is it Will Connors at 7? Josh van der Flier is going through return to play protocols at the moment, so we don't know if he's fit. You were one of the few who predicted he'd play the first game, and obviously Rhys Ruddock seems to be forgotten man, even though he's done he did really well and he's been very good for Leinster. Is Connors man in possession of that jersey?
Yeah, I thought he was excellent against Italy. I actually thought he was my man of the match, and I was kind of no disrespect to Ty Byrne. He's obviously having the season of his life, but I thought Will Connors was brilliant, and he brought a little bit that I hadn't really seen much for Leinster, and a little bit of ability to link play. So I had always just seen him as a chop tackler, like a Tipperick type of player where he just chops and gets up and chops and gets up. But his ability to create havoc at the ruck after the chop, like he bounces off the ground so quickly, and his work rate is so good. But his handling is, something that Ireland can exploit and can use it as best they can. So yeah, 100% Will Connors, I think, will start.
Okay. Prediction time. Niamh?
I'd like to see Ireland win. I think they'll win. I think it'll be very close, but I'd like to see them go and push it on another level and bring that confidence from Italy. So yeah, Ireland. Don't ask me by how much.
That was the most lukewarm prediction I think I've ever heard. Oh my God. I'd like Ireland to win, so Ireland.
I'm going with Ireland. Ireland, 100%. I actually 100% believe Ireland will win it. I do. I think I saw so much positive stuff from Italy on top of the positive stuff that we'd spoken about in the first two games, and I really believe that they can mix it up there now. So they've got to do it. Okay,
I'm a bit more convinced, feeling a bit more reassured. Andy, Nicol?
Oh, listen, I think if Scotland can get that accuracy that they showed down at Twickenham, and just that execution, the set piece, and the physicality that just dropped off slightly against Wales, then I think Scotland can. I think even with the defeat, there's still a confidence there, and it's not a misplaced confidence. It's confidence in the quality of how the team played down in London. And so, listen, we've been here before where we've had one-off wins and not backed it up, and that for me was the biggest disappointment of not beating Wales. We've always had that. You mentioned at the start, Joe, the soft underbelly. That's always been a valid criticism because we've never backed it up. And so this for me is a massive game to show that actually who's the real Scotland? Is it what we saw at Twickenham, or was it what we saw in the second half against Wales at Murrayfield? And I genuinely think this team has turned a corner. I'm not going to say that they're going to win this game easily. I think they can win it, and I think if they get certain things right, I think they will win it. So I think it's going to be really tight. So 3 to 5 points, and that means literally a slight drop off, bounce the ball. It could go either way, but I will back Scotland this time, and I haven't backed Scotland against Ireland very often, I have to say, in the last decade. So so I'm probably going to be wrong.
Well, listen, no offence, we hope you're badly wrong.
Yeah.
There's a text in. Great to hear Andy Nicol on with your lads. Any man who can drop in peripatetic into the conversation is all right in my book, says Tommy. Listen, touch of class, Nicol, touch of class. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, official sponsor of the Irish rugby team of us, everyone in. Just a quick word from you both on the game at Twickenham, because it should be absolutely brilliant. So England trying to recover some form, and France after the COVID outbreak are, well, I mean, who knows where they are? Intimac's back in the squad, Vakatawa's back in the squad, Arthur Vincent is too ill to return. Like, the COVID thing has just been almost parked as if they're over it. But you look at Liverpool players who had COVID, they weren't the same. I think Paul Pogba, who had COVID, was not the same for a while afterwards. It's all well and good, Andy, being able to, get up and about and go through training, but whatever those few percentile points are for a highly tuned athlete, there's no guarantees that you just get those back, certainly not straight away, and they've had a bit of a gap as well. So, there's a ton of question marks over this game.
Yeah, there is. And that's caused by COVID. There's a ton of questions we've got about England that's almost self-inflicted, isn't it? About what side Eddie Jones picks, how they go out and play. At times against Wales, when Anthony Watson scored that try, they were back up to sort of the levels they hit against New Zealand in the semi-final of the World Cup. But since then, it's not been great for them. So listen, if France are anywhere near their best, they win this game. I think France are the class act of the Six Nations. But England, what we've not talked about is the lack of crowds, and that is a big factor. And so Twickenham, without 82,000 English fans there, France can just go out there almost in a relaxed state and go and perform. And so I think France win this game, but the only caveat is have they recovered fully from COVID? And if not, then England can turn it on. They've got too many good players. I said that about Ireland earlier. And these players, a lot of these Saracens boys have hardly played. And look at Itoje, and how many penalties he gave away. That's just match sharpness. It's almost like mental sharpness as well. You can't switch that on sometimes. You've got to get used to it by playing. So, that another game under their belt, they might be a bit sharper. So, you don't often back against England at Twickenham, do you? But I probably am. I'll go France.
Right, OK. I was listening to Bernard Jackman talking to Hugh Cowell on the RT Rugby podcast, and he often has his finger on the pulse on matters French. So what's going on over in that camp is it's actually not good. So it seems a number of the players are unhappy with Galtier. And they're also unhappy that I think it was the sports scientist has been identified as patient zero and been thrown over the bus. And therefore they, you know, made sure it got out that Galtier had left the camp for his own reasons to go off and watch his son play rugby. And Bernard Laporte came in and warned them that if the leaks continued, they would not be playing at the World Cup. But the unhappiness with Galtier continues. So, I mean, it's all wonderfully French, Niamh, but that's kind of bubbling away in the background there. It seems Galtier, you know, he's been cleared officially, which was always going to happen, I suspect. But it seems actually the players are looking at him saying, we're not okay with this.
Yeah, it's so French, isn't it, really? When they're, you think they're just got their handle on their affairs, I suppose, and they're starting to play brilliantly well and have a great backroom team, you know, with Galtier in terms of Sean Edwards and the likes, and then they kind of go and press the self-implode button a little bit, and it'll be interesting for sure. I kind of agree with Andy. I think France have definitely been the informed team in this tournament, and I think, did I read today that Leroux is out as well? Bernard Leroux, I think he's been a huge big player for them, and if that's the case, England, I can't back England. Yeah, I would back France, definitely. If they can just get their affairs, they're just such a mess at times. It's ridiculous in terms of it just drive you insane, considering the amount of unbelievable players that they have at their disposal and their ability to play from anywhere in the park. And I suppose if Bakhtar is back in, he goes back in, and then that adds another piece of artillery to their game. So look, I think France they've been in too much good form, I think, and if everybody's fit and ready to go, I think they'll be way too sharp for France.
That is the question.
For England, sorry.
Yeah, for England. Yeah, sure. Two really good games. I mean, far from predictable, and it looks like a really good round four. Last one, Andy, is we're here. The last I saw, it's gone kind of quiet. Is Scotland France refixed? There's talk of Friday the 26th. Is that the latest you're hearing?
That's the latest I've heard, but why is it taking so long? And this just highlights how political rugby is in Europe, I guess, because the last I heard was there was negotiations taking between the Six Nations and the English clubs. Because we've got a few players playing down there, it seems strange that they are one of the major decision makers in this process. And so, it's looking like the 26th. I personally think that there's been so much going on in the French camp. And I'm saying, I would have said this if this was Ireland or England or Wales whose match was cancelled. I think they should have forfeited the Scotland game and be punished in that way, so they can still win the Six Nations, but not the Grand Slam, and be finished on the Super Saturday as planned, not with this game that's hanging over in a later date. So I think there's been a lot going on. You said it there, what Bernard Jackman's reporting. There's a lot going on in the French camp that we're not hearing about. The Sevens, the women's team, that Marcoussis with the training camp was rife, and it's just not right. There's protocols in place, and I think they've breached them, and I think they should have been punished as a result. Yeah,
look, it's certainly going to be, I mean, unless Wales win a Grand Slam, it won't quite be the Super Saturday by signing off and saying we'll find out what happens in a week, you know, but there we are. Listen, Niamh Briggs, always great to have you on. Andy Nicol, thanks so much. What a pleasure. Great to have you on again.
Always a pleasure. Anytime.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.